bit early. If you do, oh, I'm going to stop that. My clock says 6 p.m. Eastern, so we're going to go ahead and get started this evening. My name is Natalie Abel, and I'm with iNACOL. I help to manage our communications, and I'm going to be helping to facilitate and moderate tonight's webinar. So today we're going to be exploring powerful personalized PD for teachers, and we have a wonderful panel of expert teachers here today to share with us their lessons learned, promising practices, and potential pitfalls to avoid. So before we get started, I have just a few administrative items. Today's webinar will be recorded and archived on the inacol.org website. So following up to this webinar, we will send you an email with a link to that resource, as well as the PowerPoint slides too, so you can refer back to these at any time you need to in the future. In the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, there's a chat box. So I encourage you to please introduce yourself, say who you are, where you're from, what you teach, what you're hoping to learn today. And I encourage you to also ask questions in the chat box throughout the webinar. And I'll collect those and save those for the end, and we can pose those to our presenters during Q&A. Also, if you are a fan of the Twitterverse, I encourage you to share what you're learning with your networks there as well. So we're going to be using the hashtag #TeacherTalk for today's webinar, and you can also tag iNACOL's handle as well. So I'll throw those in the chat box here in a minute. And I don't want to take up too much time. So with that, I'm grateful to turn it over to Natasha to kick us off today. So Natasha, if you want to press the talk button, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing really well. So my name is Natasha, and I teach at USC Hybrid High School here in downtown Los Angeles, so it's a little earlier here. And I'm going to go ahead and start with a little introduction. So USC Hybrid High is a charter school within Los Angeles Unified, and we are a one-to-one school, so we blend technology with just traditional classroom practices. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that and kind of what our professional development looks like throughout the day. I've taught at a public neighborhood school before in Las Vegas and in LA Unified, and I've never been able to collaborate as much as I have at this school, and it's all due to the model in which we function. And so I'll talk about that, and I'll also talk a little bit about what I do, which is very much grounded in educational theory and then really just explored in practice and just experimented every day. If you would like to ask some questions in the chat box while I'm going, let me know if I'm talking too fast or anything like that. You want me to pause on a point, please let me know. I'll try to take a look at that as we go. All right, so this first slide that you see here are our pillars for our organization. So Ednovate is our organization in which we have 2 charter schools right now, and then we have a 3rd opening in the fall, and then 2 more charters were just approved, and all of our schools function under these same pillars that we believe that our mission and our vision wholeheartedly is to make sure that all of our students are able to get into a 4-year university. And so we have our very first graduating class of seniors, and they have all been accepted into 4-year universities and will be entering all this fall. And so most of our students, I should say, are the first in their families to apply to colleges, to go to college, and they know that they are creating a positive multi-generational change. And that's definitely something that we are all rooted in all together. So a couple of things here. You can see that we work as a team throughout the day, and we value integrity, mastery, and entrepreneurship, and also joy. And those are the same pillars that we share with our students every day. We also trust one another. We are highly committed, and we take accountability. And what that looks like at our school is that we have very high expectations for our teachers. So here, right before every quarter begins, we have all of our module work published in Canvas. So we use Canvas as one of our main platforms. And so we all have a very clear vision of where our students are going, and then we all check in with one another and can align from there. All of our data is also very public, and our teachers just adjust accordingly to the data from our ACT scores, our SBAC scores, AP scores, performance task scores, and we all just help each other out to make sure that we have our best results from our students. So that's definitely how we function here. If there's any questions, feel free to pop them in. All right, I don't see any so far. Moving on. So as far as our model goes, we ground that in Benjamin Bloom's theory of like using technology. So he says that the average student who receives one-to-one mastery-based instruction performs at the same level as the top 2% of students who receive traditional group instruction. So we know that we are able to reach more students through technology, and I can see that directly from moving from a traditional classroom into a hybrid classroom where my students can be working on a document and I can see all of their documents. And I can just give them one-on-one feedback, and they can adjust as they go. And so it's very personalized throughout the entire day rather than me trying to just talk most of the time. I really let my students collaborate with each other and really explore their own learning. So on here you'll see that we definitely lean on one another. So for my biggest learning experience of coming into this school is that I lean on all the people that have been at this school, and we are all willing to learn from one another. And so I collaborate daily on a team, and this is everything that I've always wanted to be able to do. I think that was something we were reaching for in my old school, and here I actually get to do that. And so we are all part of one team, and all of our teachers collaborate with our network, our principal, our deans, our assistant principal. Everyone just helps to work together. And then I'm part of the English department. So in that department, we strive for vertical alignment in our classrooms, and we steal from each other, and we can see each other's Canvas courses. And we can go through a consultancy protocol where we all can see what, since I'm an 11th grade teacher, I can see what the 9th, 10th, and 12th grade teacher are doing, and I make sure that I align accordingly. And then I'm also part of the Team 11 team. So that's all of the junior teachers, and we work every day for horizontal alignment in our classrooms. So we're G-chatting each other all day about our students to make sure that they're doing well. Our classrooms are open to each other. We also plan a lot of assignments together, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in the coming slides. All right. So this is how it all comes into practice. So one of the things that I rely on heavily is a technology to help me stay with it in the classroom, because one of the things that we may fear is that our kids can get distracted by the plethora of stuff that we can see on the internet. So all of the teachers at our school use a program called Hapara so that we can see what our students are doing on each of their computers, so we can make sure that they are on task at all times and being held accountable there. We also use Canvas, like I mentioned earlier, to build out all of our modules. And then I rely heavily on Google Documents. So I use Google Docs for everything. I build them out there, and I also use Google Drive for my students with special needs. I have a special Google Drive where they can go in, and they have all of their accommodated documents. I think Google Docs is wonderful since there's so much, it's free, so anyone can access it. They've also added a lot of new features, and I'll show, there's an example of a Google Doc toward the end of my portion. So for example, one of my students has cerebral palsy, and so he relies heavily on listening to the documents, so he can do that through Google Docs. He can highlight them and have them read it back to him. So it's just a really great tool that I encourage everyone to really go through and use it. It's there for free, and I just love it. I can't talk anymore about that. It's just so great. The other thing is the zone of proximal development, so really making sure that our teachers are able to configure their classrooms in any way that they want. So the picture that you see here is just one section of my classroom, and I have a lot of collaboration space for my kids to work, and then also spaces where they can maybe work independently. So I definitely use that to my advantage. They have self-selected seating in here. I also have self-selected honors, so there's a lot of autonomy on the students, and then they can push themselves to as far as they would like to go there. A little bit more. I'm definitely rooted in constructivism, and I want my students to make sure that they are able to construct their own knowledge. And so here in this photo, there are two of my students that are working on a performance task, and so that happens at the end of every quarter. And so they're able to, in this picture specifically, they were working in groups to create podcasts on a sector of our nation that was being dehumanized, and they made informational podcasts, and they had visual timelines, and they all graded each other and listened to that, and we wanted to get some of those published, and so those were all really cool things to indulge the students, and they were very creative but also very well informed. And yes, I can talk a little bit more, Kyle, about self-selected honors. So the glory about Canvas is that I am able to create modules that students can select into. So I have that available to them, and I made an honors module for them. And if they wanted to do honors, they had to complete that module. So I have right now some assignments where they're doing readings on like pedagogy of the oppressed, Audre Lorde, just some college level text, and the students know that they have to complete that honors module each quarter to earn their honors credit. So that really encourages students to take a little bit of a risk, and then I support them there. But I did not separate my honors students from non-honors students in the classroom because it's such flexible arrangement within my classroom, so I was able to kind of work with all of my students there. No problem, Kyle. So real quick, as I wrap up, I'm very much someone that loves working under the impression of like understanding by design and backwards planning, and so I have an essential question that I have my students work with every quarter, and I keep that at the top of mind, and I make that very clear for my students. And so before I go into a quick example, some of the things that I use in my classroom with the help of Google Docs and Hapara and Canvas is that I still use workshops. So what I'll do, the difference is that as someone that uses technology, I can see how my students are doing in real time, and then I can pull students into workshops immediately. So if some of my students are struggling, say on comma usage, I can pull them into a workshop immediately and react to that. So my teacher talk time is very limited. I'll only present for about 10 minutes or so to the whole class maximum, and then it's just pulling students one by one, or in groups of 10 or groups of 15 or groups of 5 or 2, and I go from there. So I really leverage peer tutoring as well, and I just let my students lead a lot of their learning in this classroom. A lot of literature circles, gallery walks, a lot of the traditional things that you always see, but just kind of leveraging technology there. All right, so real quick as I wrap up, here's an example of one of the Google Docs that my students currently worked on. So I have the essential question at the top there so they know what they're focusing on. I like to have everything in tables. So on the left I had parts of I Have a Dream by Dr. King, and then all of those hyperlinks that can link students to different things like videos, extra information that they might need to support them, where it says what rhetorical devices did MLK employ. That's a whole list with examples for them. So that's really how I leverage a lot of technology. And then what I do for my students with special needs is I take that same document and I want them to hit that same target, but theirs looks like this. And so there's a couple of extra links, a little bit of a sentence starter here and there. The students that are in the class will never know if a student with special needs is working on this document, but I'm able to just color code, just do those little traditional things that we know work for our students with special needs, but then I could take it to the next level using technology. And like I said, one of my students can also have this read back to them. They can also put in audio recordings for their answers. So I really love using Google Docs, and this is really typical of what you'll see for my assignments here in this class, just keeping that rigor for my students, but just using technology and leveraging that here. So that's all I have. I can take any questions, but I know that the next presenter, I'm sure, is anxiously awaiting to speak as well. But thank you so much all for listening, and I will definitely take any questions in the next minute or so if there's any.
Thanks, Natasha. Hi, I'm Sandra.
Great. So I'll pass this on to Sandra. Yeah, you got it.
Thanks, Natasha. Okay, we're going from high school to elementary school. I teach at a K-5 school in Conway, South Carolina. We're not all one-to-one. Our 5th grade group is one-to-one, and other classes have technology in the form of iPads. 4th grade is just about one-to-one. 3rd grade's almost there, and we're working on it. But we strongly believe in technology and that it does make a difference in impacting education for students. And elementary teachers tend to like how-tos and show-me's. So I've put together some slides to talk about how I've used GoFormative and Google Classroom in my blended classroom to make things go smoothly and to affect individualized learning for the students. Okay. So if you've never used GoFormative.com before, it really is a wonderful website. Teachers are always looking for ways to create formative assessments for their students, and this makes life easy for teachers. You can create assessments, classwork, and homework on it. Very easy to create the assignments, and also easy to assign it to the students. But the wonderful thing about GoFormative is that it gives you live results. And as Natalie was saying, you know, when she pulls children into workshop, you need to know who to pull into the workshop and what to do with them. And GoFormative makes it easy for you to do this. We know we're working very hard to use blended learning models in our schools to be effective with our students. And we know that the goal is to address the individual needs of students in order to make teaching and learning more effective. And the results that you get from GoFormative, you can use that to determine the individual needs and also to create your small groups. This is directly from the website, just a quick visual to show you how it works. But basically, you create your assignment, you assign it to your students, you get live results, and you can see those results in real time. So as the students are working, you can see exactly what they're doing. Sometimes I'm watching the monitor, and if somebody misses a question, I can say, hey, you missed this, or I'll go and sit with a student because I can see that they're really in need of some help. And then you can use those results in many ways, and you can also give the students feedback from what they've done. It works for any grade, any subject, on any device, and it's wonderful in a blended learning classroom. Okay, so again, a little show me how to use formative or work with formative. The website is just goformative.com, and you can easily log in with your Google account. The neat thing about it is that you can either create your assessment or your assignment from scratch, or you can take any PDF and turn that into an assessment or an assignment. I use a book called CARS. CARS stands for Comprehensive Assessment of Reading Strategies. And what I like about this is the fact that there are 10 lessons. Each lesson has a story or some text, and then there are 12 questions. The 12 questions are consistently testing the same skills over and over again in the same order. So number 1 is always the main idea question, number 2, facts and details, etc. And in doing so, you're able to create the groups and see exactly what the needs of your students are. To make that assessment, you simply just click on the document, on the PDF where you want to put your question, and then you have the option of making true, false, multiple choice, open-ended, any kind of question that you want. And if you do your own personal test, you can copy and paste anything in there, so it makes it very, very easy. Since the multiple choices or the choices were there already, I simply typed in for the students which is the correct answer, A, B, C, or D. So for each one of these, they just had to tell which letter is the correct one. Okay. So after making the assessment, I could then just assign it to the students, and I could assign it through a link, through Classroom. If you have a website, you can use an embed code to embed it for the students. So lots of ways that you can get the work to the students, and you can even make folders to save the work. This is one view of the data. This is a single question view where you can look at the question and then see how well the students did with those questions. But my favorite view is this view. This is a summary view, and this really gives you a picture of how your students are doing. And it sets up the opportunity to individualize your learning or personalize the instruction for your students. So for example, I can see that the students are doing very well with the skills for number 2, 3, 7, 8, and 12. I don't have to worry about those. But number 10 seems to be a concern, so that's something that I'd want to do a whole class lesson on. And then, you know, the skills for numbers 4, 5, and 6, I can see the students who need a little bit more work with that, and I can pull them aside and work with them individually or in small groups. You know, looking at the whole class piece, when I go back to my CARS, as I said, they're always the same question. Number 10 is always author's purpose. So I can tell that we need work on author's purpose as a class. Whereas with the others, on number 5, that was compare and contrasting, I can see that there's 5 students who I need to pull or provide some independent work to work on that skill. 3 students for cause and effect. So Go Formative really helps to pinpoint exactly what the needs of the students are through that formative assessment I've created. This came from an article on Edutopia, but I kind of like that last part because I think Go Formative addresses this, where it says the work that occurs online can be valuable to students when targeted. Students are no longer engaged in uninteresting busy work, but focused individualized learning. And so again, we want that online work to be meaningful to the students, and Go Formative allows you to be able to put together meaningful work for those students, okay? Another thing that helps me a lot with my blended learning classroom is working or using Google Classroom. And so I do my stations that way. As I mentioned before, it's very simple to post the Go Formative lessons there so the students can easily pull that up. But in our school, the blended learning model that we use is that for we have our teacher-directed face-to-face lesson. And so that's driven by the formative data that I have, sometimes by Achieve 3000, also my observations. We have our digital content station, and Achieve 3000 takes care of that for us. And then there's always that independent or collaborative workstation where sometimes we're not sure what to do with the students in that station. Again, Go Formative helps because if I see that students need help in a certain area, I can certainly give them assignments based on their needs. However, one of the struggles for our elementary teachers is spending so much time making task cards. And so I found that Google Docs is very helpful in making task cards. I simply make the task cards in Google Docs, and then I create an assessment or an accountability piece, and I use Google Forms for that, and I post it all in Google Classroom. But in my Google Docs, I have all the steps they need, any questions that they might ask me. I make sure that I address all of those. So while I'm working with my small group, I don't have children coming up to me and asking questions. So here's an example of one of the task cards I created. Again, that collaborative independent group is more flexible, and so sometimes I can get my grammar in that way. This is an example of a lesson that I posted where the students worked on prepositions. So I created a task card using Google Docs, and on the task cards I had the link where they do their online learning, and it was interactive. I had the practice assignment linked for them, and also a little quiz that they would take for themselves to see how well they learned the material. For myself, for that accountability, I created a little project that they worked on their iPad. And in this project, they had to teach others about prepositions and prepositional phrases using the Comic Creator app. So there was a creative piece in that as well. And they had the option to work with a partner or not. Here's an example of one of the students' work. But again, that was something for me to see that they're learning the material, but they also had a chance to be creative in that as well. And they could upload their work to Classroom. I can see their work, and then I can give them a quick grade so they know that they are held accountable for their independent work. Okay, so these are just some of the ways that I've used Go Formative and Google Classroom to help make sure that blended learning goes smoothly in my classroom. Okay, I hope this is a benefit to some of you, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this over now to Thomas.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me well. My name is Tom McMahon, and I also teach in Horry County Schools. I teach at St. James Middle School. At the middle school level in Horry County Schools, we are one-to-one. We have all our students currently have iPads. Now, next year, we're not sure. The technology committee may change to some type of other digital device, so we may not have iPads, but right now we use iPads. I teach 6th grade social studies. This is my 3rd year teaching 6th grade social studies, but I've taught 7th grade social studies in the past, and it's my 21st year in experience. So I can remember back to the days of my student teaching where I had the purple, run the paper through the purple machine and making sure I didn't lose the hard copy, and now we've moved up here to digital learning. So in this presentation, there's about 6 things I'm going to try to quickly go through. The first one is kind of what is blended learning and basically how I use it. Going through a thing called station rotation. 3, how do I get my data for my grouping? 4 is my grouping. 5, I'm going to go through some logistics I've learned and some of that stuff through the hard way. And the 6th thing I'm going to go through is some of the resources that I use in the classroom. So one of the books I got introduced to a grad class about 6 months ago is a book called Blended by Clayton Christensen, or sorry, by Mark Horn and Michael Horn and Heather Staker. And on the cover, you'll notice it's called A Field Guide to Disrupting Class, and it's a real good book to, you know, summer's coming up, we're going to have some time in the morning drinking our coffee without having to teach our classes. Maybe you're sitting by the pool. It's a pretty simple read. You probably have it done in a week, but it's a good guide or give you an overview of blended learning and give you a good idea of things to share with your administrators and other you know, teachers at your school. So this is one of the pictures you'll see inside the blended learning book, and this is what I use in my classroom. It's called station rotation. And you'll notice on the right, it talks about small group instruction, and this would be your teacher directed. You'll notice in the bottom of the circle, it's called independent work or collaborative activities, and then on the left is online learning. Now, towards the bottom left, you'll know where it says paraprofessional. Now, unfortunately, my district doesn't have one of those in my room, so it's me and, you know, 25 to 29 students, so I don't have that extra help to keep an eye on those kids. I do pretty well with the small group instruction teacher directed, and I do pretty well with online. The one place I've still struggled as a teacher is the independent work and the collaborative activities for my students. With 27, 28 students in the class, sometimes they tend to get loud, sometimes off task. So that's one of the areas of my growth for next year, is really working on the independent collaborative. So what I'm going to talk a lot about today is how I work my small group and how I work my online learning. So the first thing I think you need to have if you're going to walk into blended learning and personalized learning is good data. In my district or in my classroom, I use 3 things. The first thing I use is a program called Scantron Achievement Series. Now, unfortunately, this is not free. It is purchased at the district level, so I'm not sure how much it is. But if, you know, I'm sure I can find a way through some district administrators how much it is. I also use Edmodo for my tests and quizzes, and I also use Socrative. So this is the home page of Achievement Series. As you'll notice, there's a student login and a staff login, so the students and staff all log in at the same spot. And basically for Scantron, what happens in the summer work is that 6th grade social studies teachers will get together and they'll create, in this Achievement Series, they'll create what we call mini assessments. And for all our state indicators, they create mini assessments of 8 to 10 questions. And then as educators throughout the year, we can access those and have our students take those mini assessments. They'll also work on district benchmarks. And we give these 3 times a year to assess to see how our students are doing along the way before we get to the state test called PASS at the end of the year. So this is the data that you see when a student takes an assessment. This has been one of my classes, and you'll notice what I like about it. It clearly groups my students. I have my reds, my high-risk kids of not understanding that standard. I got my yellows, who are my kids that are a medium risk, and I have my greens, who are my proficient and my exemplary kids who really don't need any more remediation. And also for our benchmarks, you'll notice this breaks down our different standards. So instead of me reteaching this whole section of stuff I would have done in maybe my 2nd or 3rd quarter, there's really 3 indicators that I need to reteach these students before moving on. It also tells me which questions my students did poorly on. Here I would notice they did poorly on question 5 and 6. So along with knowing which students did poorly, what standards they did poorly, in my item analysis I can really target that direct instruction of what they need. And then finally I can look at the responses of each question. So for example, if you look at question number 2, you'll notice for all the students but 1 that missed it, they answered A. So I can even target that question to see what that misunderstanding, and that's what we use really achievement series, and again, I don't have information on how much that costs. It is purchased at a district level, but it is something I use in the classroom quite regularly, probably 2 to 3 times a week. The second one I use in my classroom, and this one's free, and I'm sure most of you have heard about it, is Edmodo. Right now, as far as my learner management system, I moved more mainly to Google Classroom, but I still use Edmodo for my tests and quizzes. What I like about Edmodo is it does break down each question and kind of tells me what the students knew or what questions they did not understand. Some of the pros of using the Edmodo, first of all, what I like about it, it is simple to make an assessment. Going back to achievement series, I tried to do my own assessment achievement series and I could not figure it out. What I like about Edmodo, you don't have to go to a class, you don't need to go to a training. It's something you can learn on your own. It does give you some item analysis. And what I do also like is that students can retake a test, because my real theory is that middle school teachers, I'm not as much worried about grades. I'm more worried, did they master the content? And so when I use Edmodo, I'm really trying to have them retake tests, then identify exactly what their weak in, and have them retake it again, then retake it again until they master that topic. Some of the cons, though, if you'll notice with the item analysis, you don't get how many people answered B, C, D, so you don't get as good item analysis you do in achievement series. And then my one that I like to use on the fly, whether it's exit slip or it's a bell ringer activity, is Socrative. Some people call it Socrative, but in 6th grade they got to know who Socrates is, so I call it Socrative to kind of help them out with that. But this is kind of the data that you get. So here's 10 questions. My student scores are on the left-hand side, and on the bottom you can see what they've done well and what they've done poorly. And obviously I didn't teach this too well because there's a lot of red, but this allows me to target what they need to review. So this is basically for data I use 3 things: achievement series, Edmodo, and Socrative. So what about grouping my kids? If you remember looking back at the achievement series, I have my high-risk kids, my at-risk, and my proficiency and exemplary students. And again, going back to this activity, and again, I struggle with this independent work and collaborative. That's my one area of growth. But generally, I have mainly 2 groups. I have my proficients really working on online learning and doing some collaborative, and they're kind of on their own. They won't meet with me. But my kids who are at high risk, they're going to meet with me in a small group. And eventually, as we rotate, I will meet also with those kids that are at a medium risk. And so logistics for blended learning. If you're going to do groups, some things I've learned is, first of all, have some type of learner management system, whether it's Google Classroom, what I use, Edmodo, or something else, have an LMS. Something I found that was pretty simple is a simple paper holder that you see in restaurants to put the directions on the page. For some reason, 6th grade, they don't want to go back to Google Classroom to see the directions, or if I put them on paper, they'll see them. Have a timer. Most of you are probably like me, is when time goes and you don't have a timer, you'll go and go and go and then kind of miss what you need to talk about. And then student accountability. I have found that with a lot of my students, especially 6th graders, if I don't hold them accountable for their work with some type of grade attached, they may not do it. And so I have to use tools that I can grade quickly. With 115 students, I can't read 115 papers a night. So I'm looking for something that I can hold them accountable, but also so I can grade efficiently. So really, what are some resources I use for my 2 groups, my teacher-directed and my individual, my online learning? For my teacher-directed, first of all, I do look at the data. In achievement series, what do they not understand? Or in Edmodo, is there a question? So the first thing I might do is I have all my vocabulary for all my different units loaded in the Quizlet, and I will go over that basic vocabulary, especially my high-risk kids. Using that data, I will address specific content. What is the content? That one assessment, there was 3 indicators they didn't know. They didn't know, they had forgotten some things about the Crusades. So instead of teaching the Renaissance, I focused on the Crusades. And then what are some specific questions that maybe it's certain vocabulary, maybe it's how the words done. So I really get into this teacher-directed and really use the data to drill down and find out exactly what they misunderstand. For my individual, my online, again, it talks about accountability. And I really use, at this point, two programs. First one is USA Test Prep. Again, this one's not free. Probably a lot of you have heard about it. This one's purchased at the district level also. And I can have the students watch certain videos that have questions attached. I can create benchmark tests for them to take. So there's lots of activities I can create. I also have them go into Quizlet and use their vocabulary. And my new favorite this year is a program called Edpuzzle, which is free. Edpuzzle is a program where you can pull in videos, whether they're from YouTube or other sources. You can create your own and upload them, and you can actually add questions to the video. So every minute or two, it can be a video. So you can actually take your lectures or other things and put them into Edpuzzle and have kids take assessments on these questions as they're working through the video. The other part, too, is you can make it where they can't fast forward. So they have to watch the video. In making my videos, I've been drawn to a Richard Mayer, and he had a book called Multimedia Learning. Now, it's a really large book, and I don't know if I would purchase it right away, but if you are interested in making your own videos and your own lectures, I would first go to YouTube and Google his Harvard lectures. It is an hour and 24 minutes, so again, this would be something maybe over the summer you'd like. But he goes through some really good tips on how to create video lectures, but also that it's good for learning. So some things that he talks about in his video lectures is a thing he calls the modality principle, that basically we learn best from graphics and narration and more than graphics and on-screen text. He talks a lot about a segmenting principle where the students choose how quickly they move through a video, so you put in some of those questions like you can through Edpuzzle. He also talks about the coherence principle, where any type of extraneous material, I know a lot of times on our slides we love to put all these cute little pictures, anything that's extraneous actually takes away from learning. The signaling principle, where you can use colors or numbers to target the student to what you want them to focus on that video lecture, and then the redundancy principle, which really talks about more of our kids that are high flyers. Since they got it the first time, there's no point in them going through and relearning it again. It actually may hurt your learning. So these are some of the tools I use in the classroom. I'm going to turn it over to our next presenter, and if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Well, welcome to Myrtle Beach, everyone. My name is Kerry Pilkey, and I teach at a Title I school. I teach 5th grade. We have 90 to 93% of our students on free and reduced lunch. What I was looking at and what I'll be talking about is a year-long learning process that was, for me this year, blended learning with a multi-genre research project. Primarily a gifted classroom, but the apps that you'll be seeing were used throughout our regular ed classrooms. Students within this project were of various multicultural backgrounds, ESL students, students with IEPs, 504 plans, and we are a school that is a one-to-one, and our chosen device is the iPad for 5th grade only. Quite simply, our curriculum outlines what the students should be learning throughout the year and paying attention to both the state curriculum and our local curriculum. I try to stay on task with all of that, but it doesn't tell us exactly how everything should be implemented. I went to a simple professional development at the beginning of the school year that shared perhaps 4 to 5 apps. And one single app really sparked an idea that I could somehow put all this blended learning together and have one giant multi-genre project that lasts an entire school year that can be combined into one product at the end. The only thing was I really didn't know what I was doing or exactly where to start. I just had 5-10 minutes for each app that I was looking at that point. So I came up with a skeleton plan. I would stick to the district pacing guide. I would have all the assignments turned into Google Classroom. I could assign them that way. I could collect them that way and communicate back and forth with the students. All of our students do have an email account, a Gmail account. And then I was going to attempt to assign some sort of app for each of the required components. And of course, when it was all said and done, I needed to be willing to fail, because that really is where it all came down to. Failure is not falling down, but of course it's refusing to get up. That's a famous Chinese proverb. Kind of led the way, and my students really bought into it. So I said, let's jump in. Let's go. And then, of course, reality set in. There were all sorts of requirements for the project, summaries, analysis from the internet, a nonfiction novel that coincidentally was assigned over Christmas break to inspire them to continue to read. We did a poetry project that lasted maybe 6 weeks, and so then the students had to write their own poem and publish it. It could be a ballad, haiku, sonnet, free verse, whatever their choice was, that had to deal with their particular topic. Now, although this was an ELA class, all the topics had to be chosen from our social studies curriculum, which was 1865 to present day. So they had a lot of autonomy in their choices, and it was pretty wide open. The technology that I tried to use, or really did use in this, was Google Classroom, of course. Used the Yakit, Shadow Puppet, iMovie, a couple of variations of that. And TouchCast seemed to be the one that really pulled it all together, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. That was kind of the glue that pulled everything together. And I made a pretty sad attempt to use an e-blogger. Now, Yakit Kids, just as it says here, is an app where you can upload any photo and make it talk. If you see the picture of Anne Frank to the right here, this is a student product. Anne has an unusual looking mouth, and that's because the students can add a mouth to it. They can add eyes, ears, all sorts of different items, and then they can narrate. They use it to summarize information, and it only lasts for a 15-second amount of time. So therefore, the students have to be pretty concise with what they say. Some students stuck to historical significant pictures like this one. Others, they chose to have like talking vegetables and things because this is a 5th grade after all. The professional development on this at the beginning of the year, really simple, straightforward. It took no time for me to learn it, and the students picked it up right away. Now, Shadow Puppet was a step up from that. Shadow Puppet allows you to capture pictures or your own artwork, and you can put it into a series of pictures. There are some templates for that, and then the students can record some sort of voiceover that narrates a story or provides information. In this particular case, the student was looking at the Great Depression, and he talked about harrowing experiences and hardships, followed with, of course, the relief and the recovery effort and progress after that. And as you can see, it was very short. It was only a matter of a minute and 13 seconds for this one, too. So these small pieces were created throughout the year as part of the project and part of the requirements. Students seem to really love, of course, the iMovie app because it can make movies. Part of the app provides you with the opportunity to make a trailer that comes complete with the exciting background music and intense graphics. Students get some sort of option to insert their photos into it, and then the dramatic audio in the background kind of rolls with it. There is a template, of course, with all of these. This student was looking at desegregated schools, and in particular, he was looking at busing issues, which, of course, is an issue that's come up again in just the recent news. So it really was intense for that student to see it come into the news recently. Now, iMovie has another part, of course, and that's where you can actually create full-fledged movies. And this student downloaded portions of movies from YouTube and other sites, and then in this case, the young lady at this point, she was recording a portion of the novel that she read aloud, and then she was about to explain just why it was significant and important to her. Any of the learning they were doing here as a research project, they had to turn it into an analysis and summary and explain the significance of what they were learning along the way. Now, TouchCast Studio, I like to say, is the one app to rule them all. TouchCast was the one that sparked the whole idea. The professional development I had didn't spend a whole lot of time on this, and so I actually had to go back and get more professional development. I'll talk about that in a minute. TouchCast Studio allows that student to take all these other projects they're doing, anything they've been working on, and they can put it all together into one single project and either manually operate it and show it or present it to their classmates, or they could even have everything pre-recorded and just run it as if it was similar to a PowerPoint. But it's much more intense. In TouchCast Studio, students can actually insert their own published materials into the podcast. The poem you're looking here, ironically, is about technology, And the young lady who's in the picture, she actually had a friend of hers read it out loud, so the voiceover came from her friend. The background was provided by the TouchCast Studio app, and in that app there's a green screen, and so she was able to put herself into this particular position with a spinning globe in the background. Another example of a TouchCast Studio product with a student here is it shows that you can insert more than one item at a time onto the screen. He chose to insert both of these, and he put himself into kind of a newsroom kind of atmosphere. It was the only app available that I know of that has a green screen that allows students to place themselves into different scenarios. And there are a lot of different scenarios that they provide. Maybe an annotated web page or video or a map even. Could be your own pictures. You could be doing a news story. They do have a talk show kind of scenario. You could be standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial giving a speech of some type, or even doing a sports cast or a business cast. So it's quite effective. It's the only app also that I can find at this point that really allows you to integrate all the other apps into it. You can open them up. They can be playing a video while they're speaking, and it's just like a regular sort of newscast where they can refer to what's on the screen or what's going to be coming up on the screen. Now, along the way, I ran into quite a lot of pitfalls in my learning. I already had mentioned that I just had a passing familiarity with how each of these apps might work, and my professional development got me started, but there was a lot I had to learn along the way. I knew how to evaluate the content of the research product here, but I really, got lost in the product itself. Everything was amazing that the kids were doing. It was just phenomenal. So I had rubrics for the research requirements, but not really any of the products that the students were creating. So I had to spend a lot of time trying to create rubrics or research rubrics. And I found them to be pretty effective, and the students were able to give me a lot of feedback, and together I think we've worked on creating some workable rubrics. Now, my blog was a disaster because I couldn't maintain any real consistency with it, and there was a learning curve for me. But it turned out my students actually preferred discussion groups and Socratic seminars here, and they often wrote some of their own questions for seminars as they learned a little bit from the National Padea Institute. And my students, of course, being fifth graders and coming from homes that are somewhat impoverished, they don't have a whole lot at home to work with, so they're not used to word processing. So they could actually do work much faster in their manuscript than they could in typing things. But they solved this problem. They submitted a lot of photos of written work that came from their notebooks and were able to put that into their finished products too. But my students saw every one of our failures along the way as a problem that was yet to be solved. Okay, they didn't see it as the end of anything when they made a mistake or an error or it failed, because I think they saw me failing every day. So that kind of helped. We all kind of failed together along the way. Now, my district was nice in the professional development that they supported me with. The session I started that began this whole idea was called Digital Storytelling in Science and Social Studies. The session introduced me to all of these apps and a few others. And then I had continued support bi-monthly from my district. There was a technology specialist that would come every other Friday. They'd spend time working with us, and they took input from our grade level team and individuals such as myself, really differentiated that professional development to be effective for our team, and we really came to realize that teamwork makes this whole dream work, folks. And so this is kind of where I'm going to wrap it all up. If you have questions, please feel free to ask, and you can email me. I'll post that email in just a second. But I'm going to turn it back over and say thank you very much.
Thank you, Carrie. That was wonderful. I really loved what you said about your students seeing you failing every day. That's something I hear all the time from teachers, that whenever they make themselves vulnerable in front of their students, and students can pick up this technology so quickly, that the students see that it's okay to fail, and they realize that everything can be solved and it's not a big deal. So we did have a few questions come in a little bit earlier. And please feel free to ask questions in the chat box now. We've got about 10 minutes left. And we had some questions for Sandra. So Scott asked a while ago if the Go Formative platform that you were talking about was free. And I wasn't sure. I didn't pick up on whether or not that was a free technology or not.
Jumping in. Yes, Go Formative is free. It's just goformative.com, and there's no money involved, and it gives teachers a lot of options.
That's great. And we had another question for you. Monica asked earlier if it's something that a for-profit can use, and I'm assuming the answer is yes, that anybody could use it, but just to provide some clarification around usage there.
Yes, again, yeah, it's for anyone. The teachers have found great benefits using Go Formative, but really it is a program for anyone.
Great. And Kyle asked as you were going through, I forget which platform it was now, but he asked if you can tell which wrong answers the students are choosing throughout.
You sure can. In that summary view, that's the best way to look at the students' work. And as they're working, as they're answering the questions, you'll see green for correct and red for incorrect, and so you can see what the students are doing as they're working.
Okay, great. Thank you. So those are all of the questions that came in so far. So if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat box right now. In the meantime, I have a question. I was wondering how you all, as busy teachers, learn about the latest technologies and tools, and how do you decide which ones to implement in your classroom?
Okay, I guess I can start. Our district is wonderful with professional development, and they do provide a lot of professional development for the teachers. We have technology specialists in our schools who bring lots of innovative ideas to us. And then it's up to the teachers to try, and as Carrie said, sometimes it's trial and error. You see what works for your class, and if it's working, you keep it. If it's not, you throw it out.
Yeah, I kind of go back to what Carrie said too. A lot of it is trial and error. Some things you try don't work so well, and some things don't work great. But then you try to troubleshoot. With me, with putting the different directions in the paper holders, that was because I just found out kids weren't going into Google Classroom to look at the directions, so I had to come up with a simple solution. It wasn't the technology; it was more of just logistics.
I also have an opportunity occasionally to go to different conferences, and there seems to always be something new in technology being shared there. So I highly recommend that to anyone if you get those opportunities. Seek them out, ask colleagues, and of course ask around your district, and web searches alone can help.
At our school, we use a lot of just trial and error, and so some of the platforms that we use uniformly around our campus, like Canvas and Illuminate, are provided by the school. I think those are great jumping off points, especially because Canvas is used in a lot of college classes. So some of my college professor friends use Canvas, and we can talk about that platform together and how to use that. So it's also kind of helping the students transition from the high school to the college level for sure.
Great, thank you. And Mark asked a great question there in the chat box. Does anyone have a checklist to help a school go from no proficiency to full proficiency, to try to help local schools who are willing but don't know where to start or how to kick off that transition?
Well, I'm not really sure of a checklist. I haven't actually seen one, but I'd be interested also. Perhaps there might be a resource with the State Department of Education, and if not within your own state, within another, where they have some guidelines that they're looking for to prove proficiency. That could be the place to start.
Okay, and I don't have a checklist either. But the book that was mentioned earlier, Blended, Using Disruptive Innovation to Improve Schools, probably would be a good book to look into because it has some wonderful ideas for starting or using blended learning and technology in schools and classrooms.
And I know Carrie, Sandra, and I are all pretty fortunate working with Horry County Schools, and the the one-to-one initiative that we have here at the middle that is also being pushed down eventually towards more of the grades in elementary. It was more of really a district vision. It was kind of, hey, this is the direction we're going. The district has put a lot of resources and research into that. So feel fortunate to work in a district that is actually going in that direction. Again, they provide support. We have an integration specialist that works with us weekly. And we work as teachers. We know this is the expectation, so we do work a lot in our teams and share different ideas.
I think one of the ways that might help transition a school, since I came from a school without any type of technology, some of the things that we did have access to, though, were things like computer labs or a couple of computers in the classroom. And so one of the things that I tried to do once I was learning about blended learning before I came to my new school was do little things in the classroom that can kind of aid in a traditional teaching classroom. So things like maybe introducing a Google Doc as an alternative for a student where you might have like a graphic organizer that you print out, but you can also maybe do it on a computer or within a computer lab. Just maybe like those little moments that you can try to sneak in and see how your students respond to that. And if that's successful, then you can start to show your administrators and kind of go from there and see how that works. But just little sneaky little things that you can definitely throw into there and just try it out and see if it works for yourself too.
Great, thank you. We did have a couple questions come in about whether or not this webinar will be archived. We are recording it, and we will send you all an email with a link to that archived version as well as the PowerPoint slides so you can access this in the future. Any other questions from any of our attendees today before we hit 7 o'clock Eastern here, or closing thoughts from our presenters as well?
I thank everyone for attending this, and I really think this is a good opportunity. If you want to get started or you want to ask more questions, please do, because that's how you're going to grow your program. We've all learned along the way as we've made a few mistakes here and there, so we do have a little bit of wisdom we can share. So please feel free to contact all of us. We're quite willing to share our thoughts, and I do really appreciate all of the other presenters. I enjoyed having the opportunity to attend this seminar with you. Thank you.
Yes, it was wonderful presentations all around. I'm so grateful you could all join us this evening. If anybody has any other questions, we can stick around for a few more minutes here. But if not, a huge thank you to our presenters. And be sure to check out inacol.org. We've released some new resources recently that might be helpful as you guys transition toward personalized learning models as well. And we've got upcoming webinars on our website as well. So we'll stick around for a few more minutes, but if not, thank you all so much for attending, and we'll see you next time.